happened earlier in the week. About 5,000 patriots converged on the state capitol this week. They were peaceful. They were organized. They had a message. And boy, were they loud. They rallied to urge lawmakers to vote no on the religious exemption bill. Many of them were women, mothers, Republicans, Democrats, and independents alike. They wanted their lawmakers to stand up for personal freedom, individual liberty. One of those lawmakers who stood up for liberty and freedom is our guest this morning. Good morning. It is 8:11. It's Gary Byron, 11 minutes after the hour of 8 o'clock. Great to have you on board. Our next guest into the Daily Connerton Memorial Company interview chair is the ranking Republican on the legislature's Public Health Committee. She is State Senator Heather Sommer. Heather, good morning. Are you there?
Good morning.
There she is. Well, good morning, Heather. How are you this morning?
I am well. How are you?
I'm not doing too bad. Thanks for asking. So tell us about that day and the support that you had from that incredibly massive crowd.
Yes, it was quite a turnout of citizens from all across Connecticut, from citizens from all walks of life. I want to be clear, this was not this crowd of, quote, anti-vaxxers, as some would like you to believe. This was a crowd of people, as you said earlier, mothers, strollers, there was coloring books, crayons, there was, men, older, younger, all there because they believe that this is the beginning of an infringement on rights that we have here in the state of Connecticut. Many clinicians, many nurses, APRNs, physicians that were retired or, had the time to be there, they all can believe in vaccines, but they do not believe that this bill is the right way to go. This strips away someone's religious right that we have here in the state of Connecticut to object or to take a religious exemption to a vaccine that may be on the schedule.
Senator, I've been saying that all week. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yes. So, the Democrats will want to make this about mandatory vaccines. Oh, you're against mandatory vaccines.
Right.
We already have mandatory vaccines in the state of Connecticut. That's not what this bill is about. Bill is about stripping away somebody's ability to take an exemption based on their religious beliefs to a particular vaccine. Many of the people that I've spoken to that have religious exemptions are fully vaccinated. They just want to have it because they don't know what may be coming down the pike.
So two things come to mind, Senator, that I want to ask you about. What about the separation of church and state? I thought state was not supposed to be meddling into religious beliefs, religious exemptions, so on and so forth.
And I agree with you. And what you will hear the other viewpoint say is, oh, I know that these people that are taking religious exemptions are just taking them because they don't want to get vaccinated. There is no organized religion that says you can't get a vaccine.
Yeah.
So they're just taking it. And I say, prove it. Prove that to me. This is all based on conjecture. And although, the Catholic Church may say it's okay to take a vaccine, there are many deeply religious Catholics that do not want to take a vaccine that has started with an aborted fetal cell. That is their own personal decision. And I have to remind people on the other side, you don't have to be aligned with a, quote, organized religion. You can believe whatever you want, pray to whatever you want, and have a spiritual life based on anything you want. That's what our country was founded on. You don't have to fit into a category like you do in other countries. That is not who we are. So no one has the right, in my opinion, to tell you what to believe and what not to believe when it becomes in relation to your religion or your spirituality. That is between you and your God if you have one.
Right.
So the idea of, somebody stepping on that, or as I said, trespassing on that right that we should hold so dear, that, our forefathers fought and gave their lives for, to have that here in this country, to trespass on that, the bar has to be really high. We have to really think about what we're doing. And the data provided by the Department of Public Health to initiate this entire bill is faulted. It's not inclusive. It doesn't include all the schools. The way they capture information is faulty. You know, as I just said, somebody with a religious exemption could be completely vaccinated. They don't track that. The second you pull a religious exemption, they consider you and classify you as completely unvaccinated, which is just incorrect. And then what they don't tell you is there's this whole classification of children on the schools in Connecticut with the lowest measles, mumps, and rubella rates of vaccination, which is very concerning. It's 60%, 50%. Those are all schools that have no religious exemption. They have no medical exemption. Mm-hmm. These are just kids that are not complying. So I thought, and many of my colleagues thought, instead of going to this draconian measure of stripping away a religious right that we have and should hold dear, why don't we go into those schools and find out what's going on? Why doesn't the DPH do an effort to find out, do these kids not have health care? Do they not know you can get a vaccine at the school-based health clinic? What is going on? They've had 4 years to do that, and they haven't done it.
Oh.
And so, you know, that coupled with faulty data, the fact that we have the 5th highest vaccination rate in the country, and that our religious exemptions are no higher, we are right at the national average. Do we really need to go this far? At this point, we don't even have the information, and we're making public policy decisions that are life-changing for people. And I think that we should have done our homework in a much different way, and we did not.
Sure, and many will agree with you. There's something else, though, and that is also rather alarming, Senator, and that is that regardless of the vaccinations, just put that on the back burner for a moment, this is setting a precedence. If our government is mandating something and really infringing in our liberties and dictating to us and stripping us of freedoms for this vaccination, the vaccination to me, I don't want to belittle it, but it's almost secondary because most people do have their children vaccinated. OK, but I'm looking at it from, whoa, this is setting a precedence. If they can do this, what's next that the government is going to put their foot down on us on?
Well, I agree. And I just want people that may be listening to understand that I support vaccinations. I'm vaccinated. I'm married to a medical doctor. But I feel that there is a parent's choice and a parent's decision as to what is injected into their child. That has to be part of the conversation. And this just takes that off the table. It's either you get this full schedule, or guess what? You are no longer eligible for an education in the state of Connecticut. And I think that is absolutely wrong to do. We are not in a pandemic situation with measles, mumps, and rubella. If there ever was an outbreak of something, when you sign a religious exemption, you certify that if there is something, you will take your child home and quarantine them until it passes. We have never had to use that in the state of Connecticut. We have never had an unvaccinated child cause an outbreak. So we have to keep all that into context. But I agree with you. This is very scary. And I think one of the most alarming things that was said on the Senate floor came from Senator Looney when he started to discuss the fact that, you know, children are not the possession of their parents, that the parents are required to keep them safe. And if they don't, the government needs to step in. He referenced to the fact that, you know, perhaps if someone is not vaccinated, maybe that could be considered harm and abuse. He's been quoted on that. And then he started talking about the DCF. So this to me is a very slippery slope that the government is going to know better than the parent on what happens to the child. And if the parent doesn't comply, is there a possibility that the government will say it's time to send DCF after the parent? Those conversations really did not sit well with the nearly 6,000 people out there. Many of the signs were parents should call the shots. Parents need to have the decisions over what's best for their child. You know, I'm not co-parenting with the government. There were some very interesting signs.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, people are very, very concerned about that, rightfully so.
Sure. And I agree. I mean, I'm vaccinated. My son is vaccinated. But for me, this has very little to do with vaccinations. I'm not saying it doesn't play a role in it. Of course it does. It's government overreach, once again, infringing on our freedoms. But I understand that the law is already going to be receiving a court challenge, right?
Well, first of all, this is the law that went right from the Senate chamber to the governor's desk. He signed it the next day.
I saw that.
Part of that, I believe, is because, there would have been an opportunity for other people who had not thought about a religious exemption to get one before this bill actually was signed. And that was made impossible by the quick signing of the bill. It's funny. I know many legislators that have religious exemptions, and their children are fully vaccinated. They want to have it because under the bill, the Department of Public Health Commissioner can add any vaccine they see fit to the schedule, which is, very concerning for some individuals. And quite frankly, there's requirements in there for diseases that are not even transmittable in school, that you can't transmit to other people. So we'll leave vaccines to the side for now. But it is an infringement. It is the situation on the vaccine rates has not risen to the level for the government to be able to come in and take away that right. It just, in my opinion, looking at the data that no one else seemed to want to look at on the other side, it's not there. And that is and should be concerning for everyone. We will be now one of 5 other states, California, New York, all run by, blue governors that have stripped away this right. 44 other states allow you to have a religious exemption, or some have a philosophical exemption. Of the 6 states that don't allow it, 2 of them now are looking at philosophical exemptions. So we are not in large company on this. And it's interesting to watch, especially for our military families. That's one point I brought up that, of course, the other side didn't want to think about. So you have a military family coming from maybe a southern state or one of the 44 other states that allow for an exemption, and they are stationed in Groton. Many times they don't get to choose. They're like, you're going to Groton. So they come here and they have a child they have a religious exemption against a particular vaccine.
Right.
And they're now going to be told, I'm sorry, either you get this vaccine or your child, who is a military child, whose mother or father may be serving our country, keeping these people safe, is no longer eligible for a education in the state of Connecticut.
All right, so let me go there for a second. We're speaking with State Senator Heather Sommers. All right, so let's take a look at California, New York, where they also have similar laws that have been passed, but they do offer a contingency for education. And from what I understand in looking at, I didn't look at the last version of this bill, but I did read most of it a little while back when it was in the committee process. Connecticut students will actually be unenrolled. And this goes not only for our public school systems, but it also includes our private schools. So basically, parents are left with a choice of 2 options. A, they homeschool, or B, they move out of the state of Connecticut. Am I right?
That's exactly. You are 100% correct. This bill affects public and private schools, and also daycare, pre-K, and camps. So there is no contingency. And, it's interesting because our local paper here, The Day, doesn't like to talk about what's really happening with education. The way they framed it in the paper was, well, if you don't do this, you'll just have to homeschool your child at home. Okay, you're going to be unenrolled in the state of Connecticut. You are not eligible for education.
But children are guaranteed an education. They're guaranteed an education. Isn't that their right as a citizen of the state of Connecticut?
Yes, we are different than some of these other states that have, again, blue governor states that have stripped away this right, in the fact that we have our right to education is actually in our Constitution. And our religious right is actually codified in statute. These are not the same as the other states. The other states not have to prove a compelling health interest to strip away a religious right. We in Connecticut will have to prove a compelling health interest. And quite frankly, if you're going to pass a bill that requires somebody to not have a religious exemption, but then you grandfather everybody from kindergarten up, that to me means your compelling health interest has been taken away. You're grandfathering everybody. What is the crisis?
Yeah, exactly. If it's such a crisis, why are you grandfathering them? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Right. So if this was a real crisis where we had this epidemic, you would be saying, look, you either have to get this or you can't come to school. But that's not what they did. They said, you have to do this and must comply. And we are taking away your religious exemption. But you know what? If you have one now from kindergarten and above, you can keep it. So where is the public health crisis? Where is the compelling interest?
Yeah, it's a great point.
So those are things that, those two, I said, these contradict each other. You lost your argument the second you grandfathered. And they grandfathered to get the votes because none of the Democrats really wanted to vote for this because they knew, oh, my God, we're going to be throwing kindergartners out of school. But if they grandfathered, okay, yeah, I'll go with it. It may have been an easy vote to get people to vote because they felt like, okay, I'm not affecting anybody who's in the system now. But in reality, you're still tearing families apart. You have many families that have maybe a kindergartner that will be grandfathered, but they also have somebody in pre-K or daycare who is now out of luck. They cannot grandfather. So you can have a religious family that one child can go to school, but the other two are no longer eligible for an education in the state of Connecticut. And so parents having to homeschool, not every parent can afford to stay home and homeschool their child.
Of course not.
What happens to them? Not every parent is capable of doing it. It's not easy. We all saw that with what happened even in the virtual schooling that we had this year. So they will force families out of Connecticut, and they don't seem to care.
Senator, I'm curious. I'm curious what the public health commissioner, Deidre Gifford, had to say. I'm not sure if she testified on the bill. You would know more about that than I. And the acting commissioner of the education department, education commissioner. What did they have to say? Did they testify?
Well, interesting. Good question. During this long public hearing that many of us have all talked about, where we had 2,000 people sign up to speak and only 200 were allowed to speak,
right.
because of the time constraints put on by the Democrats. This is such a crisis, right? This is so important. No Department of Public Health person or commissioner showed up to testify.
Wow.
We couldn't ask any questions. We couldn't, ask questions about the data. They just were not there. Nobody from the State Department of Education. They weren't there either. I don't even think DPH had talked to the State Department of Education before they put this bill in. The Democrats on the floor, they couldn't answer any education questions. When you asked something about education, they were like, we don't know. This bill is about vaccines. I'm like, okay, but this bill affects people's education in the state of Connecticut.
Heather, you're so right.
Could this bill have at least gone to the Education Committee? Nope, never did it. And interesting about the new commissioner of State Department of Education, she had sent out a letter that we have a copy of it 2 years ago when this bill came up, saying, you know what, this is not the way to go, blah, blah, blah. We should really think this. And now we're in the spot, and now we're towing the party line, saying, yep, this is something we need to do. Many of the superintendents that I have spoken to, they don't even understand how this is coming down the pike.
This is outrageous, Senator.
It really is.
Jean is watching on Facebook Live. She says it's gross government overreach. Sarah on Facebook is saying, love you, Heather. Megan on Facebook is saying, thank you, Heather. Caitlin is saying, thank you, Heather. And Joan is saying, people are concerned with losing their freedom of choice and government control. And that, folks, is really what this is all about. State Senator Heather Sommer, is always a treat when we have you on. Thank you for your time this morning and really sharing that information with us. Looking forward to the next time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I know it's very detailed, but you hit the crux of it. This is about your own personal, individual choice versus the government telling you what to do.
Couldn't agree more. We love having you on. Can't wait for the next time. Coming right back.
Have a great weekend.
You
Bye.
too. Coming right back to your